It's 11 o'clock at night. The house is quiet. Everyone else in your world is presumably sleeping in total darkness like a completely normal adult. And you? You're lying in bed with the hallway light on, or the lamp dimmed to its lowest setting, or the bathroom light casting a thin strip of yellow under the door that you have, let's be honest, absolutely positioned yourself to be able to see from exactly where your head hits the pillow. And if someone in your life has ever noticed this, they probably said something. You're an adult. It's just the dark. There's nothing there. And you nodded, maybe laughed it off, and then the moment they left, you turned the light back on. Because something in you simply requires it. Not dramatically, not in a way you can fully explain, just quietly, persistently, non-negotiably. The light stays on. You are not alone, not even close. And today we're going deep into why, because the psychology behind this is richer, more layered, and more revealing about how your mind works than anyone has probably ever taken the time to tell you. Let's start by busting the obvious assumption, because this one needs to go immediately. The assumption is that sleeping with the light on is childish, that it's something you're supposed to outgrow, like believing in monsters under the bed or needing someone to check the closet. But here's what the research actually says. Fear of the dark in adults, which psychologists call nyctophobia in its clinical form, is far more prevalent than most people admit. Studies suggest anywhere from 10 to 15% of adults experience meaningful anxiety around darkness, and that number almost certainly undercounts the reality, because most adults are too embarrassed to self-report it honestly. We've been told it's immature, so we lie. We say we're fine with the dark. Then we go home and leave the bathroom light on. But the more interesting question isn't how many people do this, it's why. And the answer starts, as so many things in psychology do, much earlier than you might expect. Your brain has a structure called the amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster of neurons that functions as your emotional alarm system. It processes threat, danger, fear, and the memory of fear with extraordinary speed. And here's the critical thing about the amygdala. It doesn't care about logic. It doesn't care that you're a grown adult who intellectually understands that the dark is just the absence of light, and that nothing has changed between 10:59 p.m. and 11 p.m. except the switch on the wall. The amygdala doesn't process information that way. It processes pattern and association. And if, at some point in your life, darkness became associated with fear, with a nightmare that woke you, a trauma that happened at night, a period of illness or uncertainty that played out in the dark hours, your amygdala filed that association away with extraordinary care. It is doing its job. It is keeping you safe from something it once learned to be afraid of. The fact that you're an adult doesn't update the file. This is where developmental psychology becomes essential to the story. Fear of the dark is actually a normal and healthy developmental stage for children between the ages of 2 and 8. It's not a flaw in their wiring. It's their nervous system correctly learning that the world contains threats they can't always see. Most children move through this phase with the help of patient caregivers who make darkness feel manageable. Gradually, gently, consistently. But some don't. Some children had their fear dismissed rather than soothed. Some had it amplified by things that actually happened in the dark. Some were never given the tools to metabolize the anxiety, and so it simply stayed. Packed neatly into the nervous system, carried forward into adulthood like a piece of luggage that never got unpacked, because nobody ever quite told you it was okay to open it. And let me be very clear about something here, because this matters. Not everyone who sleeps with the light on experienced something dramatic. It doesn't require a single terrifying night or a clinical trauma. Research into anxiety formation shows that low-level, repeated experiences of discomfort in darkness, combined with certain temperament traits like high sensitivity or a naturally more reactive nervous system, are more than enough to wire in this response. Some people are simply born with amygdalas that run a little hotter, that respond a little faster, that take longer to stand down once they've registered a potential threat. For those people, Darkness has always produced a hum of unease that has less to do with what happened to them and more to do with how their nervous system is tuned. And that, too, is not a flaw. That is a feature. A highly sensitive nervous system is also a nervous system that picks up on subtlety, on nuance, on the emotional texture of a room. The same wiring that makes darkness uncomfortable makes you perceptive in ways that matter. But there's another psychological layer here that almost never gets discussed, and it's one I find genuinely fascinating. For many adults who sleep with the light on, the issue isn't purely fear. It's control. Let me explain. When you are awake, you can see. Seeing means information. Information means you know what's happening. You can assess, evaluate, and respond. The moment the lights go off, all of that disappears. You are, quite literally, operating blind. And for people who have anxiety, not necessarily about the dark specifically, but general anxiety about uncertainty and control, darkness is less about monsters and more about the removal of the one sense that makes you feel oriented in the world. The light isn't a night light. It's a control mechanism. It's your nervous system saying, as long as I can see, I know where I stand. As long as I can see, I haven't fully surrendered to the unknown. There's actually a concept in cognitive behavioral therapy called intolerance of uncertainty. The idea that some brains find the not knowing unbearable, regardless of whether the thing they don't know about is actually dangerous. Research by psychologist Michel Dugas found that intolerance of uncertainty is one of the strongest predictors of anxiety disorders, and it maps beautifully onto the light-on behavior. Because when you think about it, total darkness is the physical manifestation of total uncertainty. You can't see what's there. You can't confirm that the room looks the same as it did before. You can't verify that the shape in the corner is just your coat. For an uncertainty-intolerant brain, that is not rest. That is a sustained threat state. And the light, even dim, even a crack under the door, is the simplest possible solution to an unbearable uncertainty. It gives the brain just enough information to release the grip, just enough data to say, okay, I can see, I know where I am, I can sleep now. Think about what that means about you if this resonates. It means you have a brain that is deeply, fundamentally oriented toward information, toward knowing, toward understanding what's around you. That isn't weakness. That's a mind that doesn't switch off easily because it doesn't want to miss anything, doesn't want to be caught unprepared, doesn't want to exist in a state of not knowing. That same orientation is almost certainly showing up in other areas of your life too, in how thoroughly you research decisions, in how you replay conversations to understand what happened, in how you notice things other people miss. The light is just the most visible evidence of an invisible way of moving through the world. Now let's talk about the hypervigilance angle, because it's one of the most important and least recognized pieces of this puzzle. Hypervigilance is a state of heightened sensory alertness, a nervous system running a constant low-grade threat scan, checking, monitoring, staying ready. It's most commonly associated with PTSD and complex trauma. But in milder forms, it shows up in people who grew up in unpredictable environments, in people who were responsible for others' well-being at too young an age, in people who simply learned that the world required them to stay alert. And hypervigilant nervous systems do not like darkness. Because darkness removes the primary input that the threat scan uses. Take away the light, and the nervous system has to work twice as hard to feel safe. It's like asking someone to stand guard with a blindfold on. The light isn't comfort, it's equipment. There's also a connection here to something called sleep anxiety. Distinct from general anxiety, this is specifically the fear or dread that surrounds the act of falling asleep itself. Research published in the journal Behavioral Sleep Medicine found that individuals with sleep anxiety often use environmental anchors, light, sound, specific textures, as transitional objects that signal safety to the nervous system. The light is, in this sense, functioning in the same psychological role as a child's blanket, not because the person is childish, but because the nervous system is using the same comfort-seeking mechanism it always has. We don't outgrow the need for transitional objects, we just become embarrassed by them. And here's the cultural layer that nobody talks about. The idea that sleeping in total darkness is the adult, normal, healthy default is actually a historically very recent and very Western construction. For the vast majority of human history, humans slept in groups, around fires, in spaces where light and the sounds of other humans were constant. Total darkness and total silence while sleeping is, in the deepest evolutionary sense, a somewhat unnatural condition. Our nervous systems weren't designed for isolation in the dark. They were designed to sleep with information, with fire, with community, with the ambient reassurance that you are not alone in the night. The person who needs a little light to sleep isn't malfunctioning. They're reverting to something closer to the original design. So what do you do with all of this? If you want to work with the light-on habit, the most effective therapeutic approaches involve gradual exposure, very slowly reducing the amount of light over weeks, not days, while pairing the process with genuine safety signals that your nervous system can trust. Not forcing it, not white-knuckling through total darkness because someone told you it's more adult, but gently, incrementally, teaching the amygdala that the dark contains nothing new, that it learned something once and the lesson can be updated. But if you're simply someone who functions beautifully with a little light, and the only problem is what other people think about it, then I want to offer you this. There is nothing to fix. You are a person with a highly responsive nervous system, a deep orientation toward knowing and seeing, and a brain that has learned to use light as a safety signal. That's not a diagnosis. That's a description. And descriptions don't require cures. The light stays on. And now you know why. And knowing why is the beginning of something much more interesting than just turning the switch. Drop a comment below. Do you sleep with the light on? And has anyone in your life ever made you feel like that was something you should be ashamed of? I'd genuinely love to hear. And if today's video felt like finally being understood, subscribe. Because here at the Psych Spot, this is exactly what we do. We go into the real stuff every single week.